Thank you, Sebastian. It's great to be here, and it's also very nice to have in the audience some of the master planners who worked on the master plan for this project. So I feel I'm among friends here. I may be surprising you with what I'm going to say, because I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about British master plans. British eco-towns. And the first misconception is that they're in green fields on their own. That's not the case with any of them that are still in the running. The second misconception is there's no more money for them. There'll be a press release about our next year's funding any day now, and it's a considerable amount of money. I've got a team of 14 people working in Hampshire, working on the eco-town now. Community workers, transportation engineers, planners, economists, you name it, we've got them. And we've got projects that are now just about to start on site, demonstration projects. That's all happened in 3.5 years from when I started in Whitehill Bordon, when we were shortlisted. We were one of 20. And I'd just come back from a delightful 18-month sabbatical where I looked at 21 cities in Europe and America and looked at how they worked and what made them work. And I looked at social, environmental, physical, obviously, and also economic, which were the sort of 4 things that I always look at in a city. And the other thing that you might be surprised to know is the largest city that I looked at was about 13 million population, and the smallest city I looked at was 5,000 population. And I don't see scale as necessarily the be-all and end-all of what makes an eco-town. If you look on the web, you'll see eco-villages, you'll see eco-towns, you'll see places like Chicago, which have done extraordinary work as eco-cities. And I think if we're going to crack this one, we've actually got to deal at the scale of the large and the small and the medium and the very small, and the solution is different. But what I'm going to try and talk about is the similarities tonight, so we'll see if it works. So what's any town got to say for itself? Well, most towns have some historic background that gives them some meaning, some sense of place. And I think eco-towns need to have that. But the meaning that we look at when we look at historic towns are about fortifications, they're about methods of construction, they're often about who owned the town or what the town was for. This is Georgetown in the university suburb of Washington. And obviously, in years to come, I think people are going to say to us, well, what made the eco-towns special? What made them look different? We'll come to that in a minute. Economic. Every town has to be economically successful, otherwise it dies. That's Chicago. They've done the most amazing work in the soft landscaping, the prairie landscaping, which you see in front of you, which is their Millennium Park. But they've really, really got a dynamic economy going, and that will stand them in good stead through the recession. Towns build up because they're on rivers, because they have natural resources. Someone rang me up from Mexico the other day and said, where is the best place to locate an eco-town? I hadn't really been asked that question before. It's a good question. And I said, well, I think resources are still important. You know, if you've got geothermal, access to geothermal power, if you've got water, if you're in a place where the sun shines well, perhaps those things are going to make eco-cities of the future. In the way that rivers and Chicago, of course, it was railway lines, really, wasn't it? But I think there's also a social thing. For me, it's about how you want to live, actually, and whether you want to live in a suburban lifestyle and get into your car and fluster around on the M25 and then go into an air-conditioned office and sit at a computer screen and work for 8 hours a day and then do the whole thing back again and just sort of flop in front of the telly at night. And I think we're beginning to realise that perhaps there is a lifestyle that might be more pleasant. And walking and cycling to work, actually being part of the community as you're getting around. And here I've got a bus and a bicycle together. You know, you are not alone. When you're on a bicycle, you talk to pedestrians, don't you? You sometimes have to yell at them to get them out of the way. When you're on a bus, you talk to your neighbour. When you're in a car, you're completely isolated, socially and economically, from your neighbours. And personally, I find that a real problem. And I think it's dangerous for a society which segregates. And then there's also landscape. And that's one thing that we have in Whitehill Bordon. This is not Whitehill Bordon, I say. We don't have cable cars yet, but they're on my agenda, but don't tell my boss. It's the beauty of the place. And I suppose that's the reason why we're building eco-towns, because we realise the beauty of the planet, and we realise that if we don't conserve these things, and if we stop being so profligate, then there will be nothing left to enjoy. So a lot of good reasons to look at eco-towns. Now, Whitehill Bordon is quite an interesting town. It's in what's called the Wealden Heathlands, which is the land that sits between the North Downs and the South Downs. People have lived there since Neolithic times. The Romans had an extraordinary pottery there, which you find all over the Western world. You will find pottery from this part of Hampshire. It's forested, as you can see, generally. In medieval times, it was somewhere you didn't go if you could possibly help it. The forest was considered dangerous. A lot of the forest around Whitehill Bordon was hunting forest. One of the areas that we're taking over from the MOD is called Hogmoor, because of the pigs that lived in the forest. And the other thing we have is this extraordinary substrate. It's gravel and sand, and it's sand like you get on a Caribbean beach, which means water goes through very easily, but we have a very high water table. So we're sitting on top of an incredibly valuable aquifer. And we have these ponds which live and die depending on the time of year. So we also have very rare plants in this landscape. And on the open, where cattle have grazed, trees don't grow, and we have 3 internationally important ground nesting birds, the woodlark, the Dartford warbler. I can never remember them when I try and put them all in a tree, but another one as well. And that means that any development that we do, we also have to go through European law to make sure that we don't negatively affect those very important habitats. So perhaps the reason why Whitehill Bordon decided to become an eco-town was because they recognised the importance of the landscape, and the people of the town didn't want to destroy it. The previous government put out a call for developers. They said they wanted 5,500 homes. They said they wanted it away from other development, a whole other series of criteria. They wanted to develop a lead project. We had none of that, actually. We're looking not at 5,500 homes. We've got a population of 16,500 people already living in the town. We have a town already, and we don't have a developer. So we didn't fit any of the criteria. But we got through, and we got through, I think, because we made the argument for why it was such great potential. I'm going to come out of my cubbyhole now to just explain a little bit about how the town works. This is one of Claire's drawings, and she's in the audience. You can see the woodland that appears all around the town, and that's part of the forest, the medieval forest. Some of that is original forest, and you see these fields which have been dug out of the forest, and that's also very typical of the landscape of this part of Hampshire. Principally on this side of the road we have existing town. It's a garrison town. It's grown up because on this side of the main road, I'm going to try and use this. Yeah, that is the A325 which currently goes through the town, and on this side is all garrison. And here we have a tank training area, a 5.5 metre thick solid concrete kilometre square set out that the tanks sit on, and this is the Hogmore enclosure where the tanks currently play, and where we're going to turn this into a park. And the other important thing to show is an existing town centre here, but the master plan puts the town centre right in the centre. This town of 16,500 population has no comparison shopping at all. It only has supermarkets, only has convenience shopping. So there's already a huge need for lots of facilities in the town, and the garrison towns have this problem really, in that they often don't grow correctly. So the development area is principally on this side, about 4,000 houses, the same number of jobs, a new town centre, 4 primary schools, a new secondary school, and then on this side, more green space opened up to the community. There's a lovely river that runs all the way through here. And facilities, and the great thing is that a circle around that is about 10-minute cycle ride, 15-minute walk. It's a 2-kilometre circle. So compactness, which is probably quite an important thing. Now, these are our ambitions. Someone asked me beforehand, how do you measure success? What do you actually measure? Now, CLG gave us a list of about 3 million things they wanted us to measure. And we said, sorry, we're not quite sure if we can actually do that. So at the top of our list, we're an eco-town. Carbon neutrality has to be the first measure. And what we've currently gone for is emissions of the new town will not exceed emissions of the existing town. Now you say, well, you're doubling the population, how can that possibly be? You've got a huge the barracks has about 3,000 students a year, so it's a very big undertaking. That's the target we're going for, and we're measuring it in terms of carbon footprint of emissions. So that means that includes transport, that includes fuel, that includes how we deliver and take away the rubbish, where you buy your food, things like that. Very interesting discussion about how you would measure that. We're also going to 25% car use in the town. which of course is frighteningly low for traffic engineers. It's about what we have in central London, I think. How do you do that in a town that traditionally everyone's just got in their car and driven? Public transport in the town is very low. Water neutrality, a really important one for us. We're on top of an aquifer. We're in the middle of the southeast where there's water shortage. So the water usage in the new town will be at the same level, or possibly less. Actually, we think we can make it less. One shop per home is really important to achieving the carbon neutrality, because if we don't get containment within the town, if we don't get people living and working in the town, then it can become a commuter town. At the moment, that level of containment is pretty good. It's 51% of people who live in the town work in the town. That's because of the garrison. When the garrison goes, there's a danger it goes up, and we've got to work hard to keep that going. And then last but by no means least is net increase in biodiversity. The thing that gave us the imperative to be an eco-town in the first place is to preserve, not just preserve, but to improve the biodiversity. And all those four things under the carbon neutrality, of course, also contribute to carbon neutrality. They're key important ways of achieving carbon neutrality. So what makes an eco-town look different to an ordinary town? And I've just taken those targets and I'm going to show you how I think it makes things look different. Now, I think carbon neutrality is something you can't see, you can't feel. You might look at eco-housing, but it's a lot about infrastructure. Things underground, like smart grids. What does 25% car use mean for urban design? Well, I think the great thing is that it means that we can go back to smaller roads. Excuse me. This is actually Malmo, and what they've done is they've made, within the housing estates, the roads extremely narrow, and then they put these wonderful granite things here so that if your car goes into it, it gets scratched. And it's remarkable how it slows the traffic down. It's a wonderful, simple, cheap traffic calming exercise. And just to make life really horrible for cars, they have a SUD system, sustainable urban drainage system, and they put these great gullies at the side of the road. So if you drive into it, you lose your wheel. Now, you may call that a draconian method, but it doesn't feel like it, but it does slow traffic down, and people are allowed to drive anywhere in this scheme, but they don't. And I think that's probably part of the secret. With the County Council is doing work at the moment, and they're talking about, you're going to need draconian measures to stop cars. I think you can do it far more subtly. If any of you've been to a medieval town where the roads are narrow anyway, there are no draconian measures. You just can't get into them with a car. So that sort of softly approach is the way we want to go. Sorry, my throat's a bit dry. Thank you, Sebastian, for getting me some water. While we're talking about reducing cars, I think we need to talk about other modes of transport. We're introducing, thank you. Right. We're introducing cycle hire, and we want to create hubs like this one, which also has repair, which also has somewhere you can pump up your tyres. And the quality of architecture is quite important as well. I think these are rather beautiful. And because we have got hills, hire electric bikes as well to hire, so that you don't have to be really, really super fit. I'm being told I need to speed up a little bit. Bigger towns can have tram systems. Tram systems are expensive. In Britain, they're quite difficult to manage because you have to buy all the kit to go with them. but they have their place in larger towns. Water neutrality is very much about reducing the runoff and reusing the water. This is just some nice retrofitting. It just looks nice as well, you know, it's about pleasant places to be. A net increase in biodiversity is very much about finding habitats for plants and animals throughout the town. The green roof is sort of the no-brainer in that, but there are loads of other things you can do. One job per home. At the moment in the district, we have about 15% of the population working from home. We want to increase that. We think that's a really easy way. We've done some studies, and you can save about 20% of the energy you use in your life just by not going to work, by working from home. Because working from home can be lonely, so it means you have to create in neighbourhoods places, you know, the coffee bar, the copy shop, the places where you can do business. And new types of businesses. This is a photovoltaic factory. We've got a massive amount of old MOD sheds, and I just thought I'd show you a picture of the inside of the photovoltaic factory. And that's quite a clean one, but it's really just a shed. And you can do we've got high-tech people using semiconductors and making all sorts of very high-tech stuff just in a shed. It's a bit of a myth that you need high-tech buildings to create. And, of course, if you don't have to pull buildings down, you use old buildings, you save carbon. Retail is part of the mix. And again, you know, pedestrianisation, not driving. And local businesses, which is very, very difficult to achieve in retail. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to try. And local suppliers. We have got some amazing local suppliers. This is the Blackmore apple farm, which is just was on the south of that plan I showed you, and they're a local organic producer. They produce fruit, and they package it in a green way. They cool it and prepare it in a green way, so they're really good business that's already there. I think this is about my last slide. What on earth is this picture about? And it's the things you can't show on plans. When you're drawing plans about how cities should look like, you always forget about how people use them. This is a picture from the 50s, I think, of a lecture in Cambridge somewhere. You know, he's just sitting on a chair in the sunshine and talking to the students. And interestingly, they're listening. Hardly any of them are taking notes. Perhaps it's boring. They haven't got laptops. They haven't got mobile phones. It's a really low-tech way of learning. And I think sometimes we forget that actually it's only in the 20th century. We've had all this energy. We've used all these gizmos. We've lived a consumerist life. And that actually there's a possibility of going back to something a little simpler and actually rather pleasant. That's just a final photograph showing the town as it is now. Come back in 2026 and we'll show you the finished product. Thank you.